Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. What do we got today, Rick?
We got some forgotten players.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's cracking? My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. What's poppin', Rick?
What's up?
I could you come up with as many words as possible to throw after what's to intro the show. Happening, popping, cracking.
What's smacking?
I'll try that next episode.
Right.
Today we have some forgotten players on the pod. It's going to be pretty interesting to see what we got. You guys need to stick around and listen. Before we jump right into the information that you were waiting for, check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at @TheFFChamps. You can follow me at Morgan_FF and Rick at RickyLemon_FF. You can follow us on Instagram at @TheFantasyChampions. Like us at Facebook.com/TheFantasyChampions. If you are listening on a podcasting platform, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to click the bell for notifications, subscribe, like, and leave a comment down below what your favorite forgotten player in this video is. Also, we have the draft guide, which launched July 1st. We're almost a draft month, my friends. It is.
Oh my goodness.
July 22nd. I'm checking my watch in case you can't see that on the camera. It is July 22nd, which means that we are almost in draft month. But the draft guide is live right now, so you should just buy it now. Prepare for the draft that is in August and win your league. It has full rankings, breakouts, busts, player draft values, player breakdowns, so much more. If you order now, you will be entered in for a chance to be in our listener league and try to beat us. If you can. Be sure to tell your friends. So let's jump right into forgotten players. This should be an interesting. Let me adjust my chair a little bit. It's going to be an interesting episode. We came up with these guys relatively quickly, but we couldn't find a quarterback. So
no, I had a
quarterbacks can suck it.
You weren't about it.
Read the article we posted on Wednesday about drafting quarterbacks.
Yes,
by Daryl.
Very good article.
So let's talk about the first guy on the list, Leonard Fournette. He is the first forgotten player. He finished, I believe, as the RB9?
He was the RB9 last year, yep, in 15 games.
Wow. Yeah, that's not... That's ridiculous. Now, last year, I owned Leonard Fournette for a majority of the season in our home league, and I owned him in actually probably like 3 or 4 leagues. He was one of my highest purchased players in the third round because I was so freaking lit about what Fournette could do. More specifically, because he was probably going to touch the ball over what I would say 300 times, which he did. He had 265 carries and 76 receptions. Some would say it was a gross 300 touches. He had
it was a gross
3.9 yards per carry. He didn't finish too horrible in terms of efficiency stats that running backs can control. He was number 8 in breakaway runs. He was number 23. He was number 19 in evaded tackles, number 46 in juke rate, and number 9 in big hits. So he had some ability to create yards himself. He was number 8 in yards created and number 29 in yards created per touch. So he was good. The biggest problem with him was A, how many touchdowns he scored, and B, the game script. Negative 6.79, which is number 29th in the league. He had a negative game script for most of the season because the Jaguars freaking suck. And he finished with a 0.7 fantasy point per opportunity. The only thing that was the difference between what would have made him a top tier running back and where he finished was the touchdowns, and that was about it. He had 3 total touchdowns on the year. Imagine finishing number 9 at the running back position overall and only scoring 3 touchdowns. Leonard Fournette did it. And the fact that there's many reasons why he's getting drafted a little bit later. We'll touch on some of them, but he essentially is this year going, I think, in a worse position than he was last year. Right now, his ADP is currently...
Yeah, it's a little worse.
It's like 34 off the board. Yeah, no, 35 off the board as the RB 16 in half PPR leagues. And like 15 running backs going ahead of this guy. Like some of the running backs on the board right now are Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Chris Carson, Austin Eckler, Kenyon Drake. So some of them deserve to be there, but then other guys are just like if you had to take Aaron Jones or Leonard Fournette, which guy would you take?
See, I'd probably take Aaron Jones.
Okay, see, I'd take
I know
Fournette.
you would probably take Fournette, right?
I love Fournette. But the fact that he is going in the middle of the fourth round in 10-team and early fourth, late third in, and he's falling too. He's continually falling past.
He is falling, yeah.
You know, like every single draft I do, he keeps falling further down the boards. And if he gets past Melvin Gordon and, you know what I mean, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, those guys.
He is kind of getting forgot about.
So I think what he did last year, the opportunity that he had, like it blows me away that he's not getting thought about more in redraft.
Right. I mean, he still had 265 carries last year in 15 games.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't.
He had over 300 touches in 15 games.
So if you want to say he's not going to get 100 targets again, that's fine. I don't think he's going to get 100 targets again either. I think he'll probably get like 70 targets, and you can add like 30 targets to Chris Thompson or whatever. But so let's say his receiving game goes down and regresses. He's going to get more than 3 touchdowns. If he plays 15 games again, he's going to get more than 3 total touchdowns, even with that awful Jacksonville offense. In that Jacksonville team, he will score more than 3 touchdowns. You can guarantee that. I'll take those words to the grave with me that in 2020, he will score more than 3 touchdowns if he plays, 15, 14, 16 games. So that alone, and he was the running back 9 last year in PPR. I don't think he's going to finish much lower than that. You said he's like the RB 16 right now, and Clyde was ahead of him, and Chris Carson. I would take Fournette over both those guys. And you could make a debate about Aaron Jones.
There's some guys.
Make a debate about a few other guys ahead of him.
I think there's some guys that can push him out of that position. Kenyon Drake, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's some guys that are going to getting Miles Sanders, guys that are getting drafted earlier that may have not finished in the top 12 last year that might this year that could push him back a little bit, but
he's still going to be around the RB12 range.
The touchdowns are the biggest. He's if he gets the same opportunity he did last year, and he does what everyone kind of thinks he's going to do, which is a positive. There's a lot of people, by the way, in the fantasy football community that are way down on Leonard Fournette. They are projecting him as a bust. Yeah, all of this stuff.
I think it was the fantasy footballers.
Yeah,
they had Fournette in the 5th round as the RB24 or something like that. Wow. And I was just like, why?
I think.
Are you concerned about him getting injured? Or are you concerned about his contract situation?
Here's the big thing with Fournette. The Jacksonville Jaguars went out and signed Chris Thompson, who is a notorious pass catcher from the Washington Redskins. Sure. And so the assumption is not that Fournette's going to lose rushing game work. He'll probably still touch the ball on the ground 265 times. But the concern is that he's not going to get, last year he had 76 receptions on 100 targets. People are more or less believing that Chris Thompson's going to come in and take a large chunk of that target share. And so, whether it's 40 targets or 50 targets or whatever it is, if Fournette gets only 60 or 70 targets, he doesn't hit that threshold of 76. I don't even think he hits that threshold of 50 if that many targets go towards Chris Thompson. They obviously felt like they needed to bring in some relief for Leonard Fournette sometimes because he was touching the ball.
He did get
literally
a lot of touches.
It was 23, 24 times a game. That's what made him great last year. Now, here's the reason why you shouldn't be concerned about Chris Thompson. It's because he's utilized in the passing game, so they'll probably swing him out in the slot and different stuff like that, similar to how the Bears would use Tariq Cohen, right?
Yep.
So I think they would probably utilize him in that particular direction. But for me, like, how many targets do you think, Chris Thompson is going to eat into Leonard Fournette's opportunities? And I would say 40.
I projected Chris Thompson at 40 targets this year, exact.
So yeah, exact same spot. So if that happens, and let's just say that, 10 of them were just normal targets that you pull from the rest of the running back core, and then, 30 of them come off what Leonard Fournette did. If you take his total, what would that leave him with? 60 targets on the season? So, 70 targets, I should say, because I gave.
If you took just 30 from Fournette, yeah.
If you just took 30 from Fournette, that gives him 70. If you calculate his catch rate just based on what it was last year, you're talking about a total of 53 catches, which is, we talked about this before. You want to be a top 5 running back in the NFL, you got to have 50 catches, right?
Yep.
So if that's the case, he drops 20 receptions, right? That's what in half PPR, that's 10 fantasy points, right?
Right.
And
maybe lose some yards too, add
right.
like 10, 15 points. That's like 20 points. And you think he can make that up in touchdowns?
Yeah.
Because he's going to score more.
All he's got to do is score 3 more touchdowns. 6 total touchdowns is a weak season for a running back who gets this much opportunity. But you just say that. He gets 260. Let's just say he gets 250 carries, 50 receptions. He's at 300 touches again, right? He scores a few more touchdowns. All of a sudden, you're talking about a top 6, top 7 back. So just to assume that Chris Carson's going to come in and magically take all this work is just asinine. It's stupid.
Chris Thompson, yeah.
It's like Chris Thompson. Yeah, I'm sorry. What did I say?
I think you said Chris Carson, or that might have just been my brain.
Yeah, I don't know. But regardless. Like I look at Leonard Fournette, and he didn't have the most efficient year, and he didn't do things like his true yards per carry rate was 3.9. His actual yards per carry rate was 4.3. So, I mean, I think there's positive regression there for yards per carry. I think there's positive regression for total touchdowns. And I don't think, yes, they brought in Chris Carson, but I mean, Chris, I did it again.
I think Chris said it right the first time.
And then you just screwed me up.
Yeah.
So, but Chris Thompson for sure, to me, is going to come in and take work, but it's just a matter of it's going to be some, but it's not going to be a lot.
For me, I wouldn't even be surprised if Chris Thompson doesn't he'll barely play. I honestly don't even think he's going to play that much. I think he will get used in the passing game a little bit, but I think he'll get 20 carries and 30 to 40 targets. I don't really see him.
I may just be being naive and thinking that he's just going to take that work. But what makes us think that Chris Carson's just going to walk into
Chris Thompson?
Yeah, see, there it is. Chris Thompson is going to walk. I was just going to say Thompson. Thompson's going to walk in and take the same opportunities that he had in Washington.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not going to happen. What tells you traditionally, over the last 3 to 4 years, just seeing when Fournette plays a full season, what does Jacksonville and their offensive coordinator and their head coach do? They feed the running back. They feed the starting running back as a workhorse. So why are we just sitting here assuming that Leonard Fournette is just going to lose out?
Take something similar to what he did in Washington.
Ridiculous.
It's going to. He's probably at worst for Fournette. Thompson's going to have around 30 to 40 carries. He'll probably get about 55-ish targets, and Fournette could still be this is worst case scenario. He's still going to go where his ADP is, which is around the RB 15, 16.
Right. I think where you're getting him ADP wise is a good value. Sure. And I think that even if he decreases or regresses 25 touches or 30 touches or something like that, he still ends up as a guy with over 300 touches and with an increased efficiency rate. You're talking about fantasy point, in 2018, his fantasy point per opportunity rate was 8. And in 2019, it was 7.1. So, 0.71. So it's a lot of, there are a lot of variables when it comes to Fournette. And yes, adding Chris Thompson is a huge, question mark, I guess, for Leonard Fournette. Game, yeah. But if you're talking about a guy who's shown that he can be a top 10 running back before, three times, I think, in his career. And he's getting drafted as the RB15, RB16. Maybe by the time we get to, actual drafts,
if he keeps trending that way, he's going to be like the RB18, 19.
Yeah, and it's like if you're talking about getting him there, totally forgotten about. Like he's just people are just
I'm not even
passing
saying
him
like
up.
I'm going out of my way to get Fournette this year, even though I've ended up with him in a lot of mock drafts, just because people do have like kind of forgotten about him and are taking players like Clyde ahead of him, Chris Carson ahead of him, Melvin Gordon ahead of him, Le'Veon Bell ahead of him. I've seen Jonathan Taylor go ahead of him, David Johnson. I've even seen Mark Ingram go ahead of him. And it's like I don't think you should take any of those players ahead of Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, right.
To me, I think he's a very safe, solid option for somebody's RB2, unless you go receiver first 2 rounds. But he should be going in the 3rd round.
For sure. Let's talk about another running back, James Conner. This guy actually, I think his is more like Fournette played like 15 games last year, and probably he might have actually finished higher. Fournette, by the way, had he played all 16. But
a little bit.
Anyway, James Conner is a different story. He's struggled since taking over for Le'Veon Bell when Le'Veon Bell held out. He has struggled to stay on the field. He played 13 games in 2018, 10 games last year. He was having an immense amount of trouble staying on the field. Now, the big thing that I find so interesting about him is that he is a freaking touchdown machine. In 2018, through 13 games, he had 13 total touchdowns. He played 10 games last year, and he had 7 touchdowns. It's a 4.7% touchdown rate, and it's like he probably would have finished the season with 14 or 15 total touchdowns again. You know what I mean? And it's like, you look at him, and he like the years that Le'Veon Bell was on that team, he was not scoring as many touchdowns as James Conner. I don't know. Maybe it's just the way they utilize him. I have no idea why that's the case, but he does score a lot of touchdowns when he's starting, which is really great for his efficiency. He had 0.94 fantasy points per opportunity last year. The year before, he had 0.97. So he's up there. Like that's efficiency wise, that's top of the league. You know what I mean? For fantasy points for running backs. So the big question is A, health, and B, how many opportunities can we expect from him this year? We have Benny Snell. We have, who's that running back that everyone was talking about last year?
Was it McFarland or no? They just drafted McFarland.
They just drafted McFarland. They brought in Benny Snell, and then there's one more running back there.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I just can't remember his name.
He's not going to get a lot of playing time.
Anyway, so McFarland, 4th round pick, I believe. Benny Snell was like a 3rd or a 4th round pick. So they brought in some different guys, I think, because they're concerned about James Conner staying on the field and staying healthy.
Jalen Samuels.
Jalen Samuels, thank you. Staying on the field and staying healthy. Now, last year he was getting he got about 12 carries a game and about 4 targets a game. He had 150 total touches in 10 games, which generally speaking probably would have totaled out at over 225, 230. So I mean, I think for me, it's a question of how much opportunity does James Conner get? Do they put him on some kind of snap count or workload, like limit? If they do that, what are we looking at? And is it enough to be like, okay, is James Conner going to do that? Now, a lot of red flags, a lot of question marks. Last year was a weird year, not only because he got hurt again, but it was also because his starting quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger, got hurt. So you would just assume in the time that he had, like without Big Ben, that he was just going to be trash. And he had some really great performances and really great weeks without Big Ben there. It was just he spent a lot of the season hurt, so he didn't get to show off his skill in any real form. So I think opportunity is the big question for him this year. I think, the big question of who's going to play quarterback answered with Big Ben. I think they're going to be a more efficient offense. I've talked about how much I love Juju. We might talk about him a little bit later in the show. Sneak peek. But I think James Conner could definitely have a really great season this year if he stays healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I do really like James Conner. He is slowly, I think, climbing back up boards. Decent sleeper. I don't know about other formats that I've seen. But there was a time where he was going in like the mid-late 5th round.
Fantasy Pros
10-team.
Fantasy Pros average has him as the RB 21, pick 45.
Yeah, RB21. I feel like that's a little bit low. I mean, if he stays healthy, remember, Mike Tomlin has said that it's his job to lose too much. Like it's still James Conner. If he gets hurt again, though, I think then you're kind of talking about him maybe not being the starter anymore. But he is still the starter. He's still the workhorse.
Yeah.
McFarland was brought in to kind of be a change of pace kind of guy. He's not really going to take any snaps too much from. He's more of a Jalen Samuels replacement, I think.
Yeah.
But James Conner, you remember in 2018 when Ben Roethlisberger was healthy, James Conner was fantastic. He had 12 touchdowns in 12 games,
right?
Which is ridiculous. 13 total touchdowns if you include receiving. He averaged like 4.5 yards per carry. He had 55 receptions. He was playing like an RB1. And then last year with Ben Roethlisberger hurt, obviously he wasn't quite the same running back. But I think with Ben Roethlisberger healthy again, it does change the whole offense. The offense was horrible last year.
Yeah.
And it kind of, like, for not just James Conner, but for, like, Juju as well, like, it really affected the whole team. But with Roethlisberger there, I think the offense improves. And Conner wasn't actually all bad last year either. He had a rough start to the season, but he was kind of getting to a rhythm before he got hurt. I think he was the RB10 from weeks 5 to 8, and he only played in 3 games, and some other guys played 4 games. He was averaging 20 points per game fantasy-wise in half PPR through weeks 5 through 8, and then in week 8, he got hurt, and I think he ended up missing, like, he came back in week 11, but he got hurt in the game, left the game early, and he didn't come back till week 15. So he was finally finding a rhythm last year before he got hurt. But I think with a healthy Ben Roethlisberger, Conner has like top 15 potential if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean,
you're getting that in the fourth, fifth round.
If you take those first 3 weeks, I'll do those 3 weeks that you were just talking about in a second. But if you take from week 1 to 8, in terms of the opportunity that he got, because he also suffered from a negative game script for the majority of the season as well. But anyway, he would have prorated at 222 from weeks 1 through 8. He would have prorated at 222 rushes, 71 targets, 66 receptions, and about 14 total touchdowns. So, and he would have had roughly, 1,200 yards all purpose. So you put that all together, and it's what you're looking for from the running back position. You know what I mean? It's a solid secondary running back on your team. I think it's around 210, 215 fantasy points, maybe 220. And if that's the case, you're talking about a guy who finished similar to where Leonard Fournette, the guy we just talked about, similar to where he landed. And that's with horrible efficiency. I mean, over the course of those games, he had 3.92 yards per carry, and he only had he had a decent receiving yards per reception total at 8.14. But he's just very good. And I think that, when they have an offense that can move the football, it lends to James Conner's, favor if they can just get the ball in the red zone, because he was pacing at 14 touchdowns over the course of those 8 games with no quarterback. You know what I mean? If you take the games you were talking about, weeks 5 through 8, and you prorate those at 283 touches on the ground, 4.5 yards per carry, 1,285 rushing yards, 59 targets for 53 receptions, and 443 yards receiving. And so what does that total out to? 1,700 all-purpose yards, 21 touchdowns, and that won't happen. That won't happen. But it just gives you an idea and a glimpse of how the Pittsburgh Steelers would like to use James Conner and what you might get from him if he plays all 16. And for a guy that had 2 decent seasons, there is, like I said, there's justifiable concern for people, and that's probably why he's not in the area that you would like him to be. But if you're sitting on the board in the 4th, 5th round, and James Conner is sitting there,
I'd for sure take a flyer on him.
Yeah, I would definitely be willing to take him.
And
unless you have
he's
other
not
plans.
Somebody I'm targeting. Yeah, I'm not going out of my way to get James Conner, but I do think he's kind of getting forgotten about, and he's falling down a little bit in drafts. At least he was. I'm not sure if he still is, but he was falling down in drafts to a point where I was very surprised, and I think he should be higher.
Like, I would be okay with drafting James Conner in the 3rd round even. You know what I mean? It's a little high, but...
In a 12 team,
yeah.
I wouldn't... I definitely wouldn't hate that.
Yeah. So let's talk about some wide receivers now. The first one we talked about on Thursday, so we won't spend a million hours on, but Christian Kirk.
Yeah.
There are 2 guys on this list last year that were actually guys that were super, super exciting going into the 2019 season that we thought were going to have, really good years, and then it just didn't pan out for either one of these guys, even though some of them, there is opportunities there for you to really look at. But Christian Kirk is the first one. And I talked about my hot take of him finishing in the top 12. I'm going to be more reserved and reasonable.
Okay. That was just a bold prediction.
That was just a bold prediction. So last year through 13 games with Larry Fitzgerald on the other side, I believe Fitz had 100 targets or something like that. But through those 13 games, he had a total of 108 targets, which prorates to 133, as we talked about on the last episode. Now,
Fitz had 109 targets.
He had 109. Did he play all 16?
Yep.
Okay. So, Christian Kirk was the feature guy in the offense, if you want to say that. I'm thinking that DeAndre Hopkins is going to come in and probably take a lot of the targets away from Larry Fitzgerald. And he'll, there is a chance that he takes some from Kirk. I really do believe that.
Sure.
But I also think that there's going to be an increase in how much the Arizona Cardinals pass the football next year.
And you think there could be an increase in touchdowns as well? He only had 3 last year.
Yes, I think there definitely could be an increase in touchdowns. So I think target share is probably right around where it should be for Christian Kirk. He's going to finish between 120 and 135. So don't expect 150 targets. Don't expect a top 5 performance from Christian Kirk. I'm not saying that at all. But I think there's a real possibility. I think he's a lock to be a top 24 wide receiver. I think that there's a few realms of possibility where Christian Kirk can finish in the top 12 in fantasy football. But
bold.
Yeah, very bold. But I think you're going to see that next year, especially with DeAndre Hopkins there. I talked about on the last episode how with DeAndre Hopkins there, it can it opens stuff up a little bit to the point where Kirk can get more opportunities to move the ball and
sure.
Get opportunity. So I think he has a real opportunity to do some great things. His ADP right now
it's low, man.
It's really low. Very low. This is what shocked me is like Christian Kirk, man, he was going. I was so surprised when I saw his ADP, and I was like, I've been smashing him in all my mock drafts, no matter where I'm drafting at, because I'm like, he just fits where you should be, picking guys that exceed expectation. Wide receiver 39. Now let me ask you: what is the percentage chance that he finishes higher than the wide receiver 39?
I think it's high. I'd probably say like 80%, 70.
Like that's crazy.
80%.
Yeah. Like a guy that got 133 targets last year. Sure, DeAndre Hopkins
on
is
pace
there.
for, but yeah,
on pace for but sure, Larry Fitzgerald's still there. Yes, they brought in DeAndre Hopkins. We've discussed that. But to think that he's going to be the wide receiver 39, even with all that being the case, like I said, I think he's a top 24 wide receiver, and he should be going a little bit higher. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's just like I don't know. It's a difficult. I mean, with DeAndre Hopkins, it leaves so much question, and it's like that's the thing that scares you. But there's no risk here. It's like is a 10th round pick or 8th round pick or 8th, 9th or 10th round pick. There's no questions. There's like, you don't sit there and you go, well, should I draft Kirk or am I going to regret it? And I'm like, no, it's an 8th round pick. You're not going to regret it. Who are you going to take up ahead of him? Josh Allen?
In 10-team mocks, I've seen him going like the 10th, 11th round. And
that's crazy.
I don't know. And I'm not even like as high on Kirk as you are. Like I like Kirk a lot.
Right.
But I think you're a little higher on him than I am. But I'm like, what the heck? Like some of the receivers ahead of him.
Yeah.
Like I've seen John Brown go ahead of him. I've seen Will Fuller, Julian Edelman. Like, I don't know. I think
he's
I would
better
rather
than
take
that.
Christian Kirk over all those guys.
Yeah.
Like, who would you're a big Deontay Johnson guy, but would you rather have Deontay Johnson or Christian Kirk?
I would rather have Christian Kirk.
Yeah, me too.
I think just Christian Kirk's going to get more of the targets. I really do.
Right.
Like, it's a question of how little they use Larry Fitzgerald. And that's kind of because he's going to be, Kirk's going to be the number 2 wide receiver. But is he going to be the Calvin Ridley to Julio Jones, or is he going to just end up disappearing because, Christian Kirk's going to get 80 targets and, Larry Fitzgerald's going to get 75 targets, and then, DeAndre Hopkins is going to get 135 targets. Like, is that what ends up happening, or is Kirk trusted in the offense? Like, if he ends up with 80 targets, then yes, that's concerning, and wide receiver 39 is not a bad place to have him. But I think he's higher than that. I think he's worth more than that, and I think that when you get him, you end up with way more value. And I think
sure.
What he did last year, and he wasn't super effective. He was a little bit less efficient than you would have liked, but I think that was more due to the fact that Kyler was figuring it out offensively. So
right.
He's got it figured out now. He's a lot better. He's improved. So Kirk is going to get more efficient this year. But I think people are just forgetting how talented and good Christian Kirk is and where he is in that offense. You know what I mean? So as wide receiver 39, smash that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
The second wide receiver we have 2 wide receivers left. I actually might change one up.
Okay.
Maybe. We'll see what happens.
It's up to you.
But I don't know if you're going to agree with it, so that's my problem.
You can text it to me.
Okay. So anyway, and the Tyler Boyd is the next guy. He's actually going a few spots ahead of Christian Kirk at wide receiver 35. So both of these guys, we talked about them last year. What were they? 7th, 8th round picks last year?
Yeah, I think Boyd was like a 6th.
So they were both kind of in the same conversation. You know what I mean? Last year. And we both thought they were going to, break out and have really great seasons. And obviously that stuff didn't happen. The Bengals were trash. And so were the Cardinals. So, but what you see from Tyler Boyd, and I actually think he is probably more of a forgotten about player than Christian Kirk is. And he's more of a value than Christian Kirk is because yes, they got T. Higgins. Yes, AJ Green's coming back. But last year, Tyler Boyd had 148 targets through all 16 games.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of targets. And it's like he wasn't doing bad efficiency-wise through the air. His only real issue and problem, I don't know where he finished last year. I can pull that up. But his only real issue and problem last year was how many touchdowns he was scoring, just because that offense was just straight hot garbage.
Right.
For a majority of the season. And what did they go through? 3 quarterbacks or something like that? But Tyler Boyd finished the season through 17 weeks as the wide receiver 17, 183 fantasy points. Catches a few more touchdowns, and all of a sudden you're talking about a top 14 guy, or the possibility of having a guy who finishes in the top. I'm sorry, that was the wrong year. 2019. I messed it all up, dude. Last year is the wide receiver 23, with 177 fantasy points. So, yeah, like I said, catches a few more touchdowns. He ends up as a top 15 wide receiver. Last year he had 5. So, and the season before he had 7, where he finished as the wide receiver 17. So I think for Tyler Boyd, if he does end up with 150 targets in an offense or 140 targets in an offense that is more efficient with Joe Burrow, I think you could definitely see Boyd finish a lot higher than the wide receiver 35 that he's being drafted at. And I think in the long run, it's going to pay off for your fantasy team to draft Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, for me, like if everybody stays healthy in Cincinnati, it could be kind of hard for Boyd to get those targets again.
Yeah, I don't think Higgins is going to. I think
Higgins stays healthy through 16 games, which he's never done.
See, I really think T. Higgins and John Ross are going to get no more than 50 targets.
T. Higgins and John Ross?
Yeah. Like, I don't even think Ross is going to be involved, to be honest with you. I think he might get like 30 targets next year.
I think if he's healthy, he'll get involved, but he's never been healthy his whole career.
Because A.J. Green is there. A.J. Green plays his role.
Higgins, I think, is meant for an A.J. Green replacement, so year one, he probably won't get crazy involved.
Like it's AJ Green and Tyler Boyd.
Right. And Boyd does play the slot. And Joe Burrow looked for Justin Jefferson a lot last year. It was one of his favorite receivers at LSU, and he was the slot guy there. So Burrow does kind of favor the slot guy a little bit. Not that he doesn't like the outside guy. I mean, last year he was throwing to everybody, but it did seem like a little bit of a security blanket for him while he was at LSU. Yeah. And if you believe in Joe Burrow and that the offense is going to just be more efficient in general,
right.
It doesn't even matter. Boyd could have less, like he could have like 10, 15 less targets and still put up better fantasy numbers because of his efficiency.
It's true. But like
you said, he had 5 touchdowns last year. Like I could see him getting like 6, 7, 8.
You know, Tyler Boyd. I mean, if you want to sleep on Christian Kirk, that's fine. He was bad last year, and I don't even want to find where he landed. Christian Kirk Kirk was the wide receiver 40 through 13 or not through 13 games, but he was the wide receiver 40 with 134 fantasy points. Now he probably finished a little bit higher if you just pace those 13 weeks out, but you get the point with him. Whereas Tyler Boyd was the wide receiver 23 last year, right? 177 fantasy points. He was very close from jumping up a little bit higher than that. But if you're telling me that he should be drafted where, Darius Slayton finished or Cole Beasley finished last year, you know what I mean? Like, no.
Yeah.
I think that he's a top 24 wide receiver. He should be drafted as such. And if you have him on your team and you draft him, what round is he going in? Same round as Christian Kirk, generally speaking?
Pretty much.
If you draft him at that point, you're getting a guy who could be a solid flex, who gets 140, 150 targets, or like you said, even if he decreases to 130, 125, I think he still has the ability to finish as a top 24, maybe even a top 18 wide receiver. But it's a matter of efficiency, and it's a matter of getting the opportunity back.
Yeah.
Both of these guys, Christian Kirk and Tyler Boyd, there's some questions surrounding whether or not they're going to get the opportunity. But last year we talked about, and there's a lot of people who didn't think Tyler Boyd was going to have a good season only because his splits with AJ Green on the field were better. With AJ Green on the field.
That's another thing is, he has played better with AJ Green.
Yeah.
And you look at 2018 versus 2019 when the Bengals offense was more efficient and it had AJ Green there.
Right.
Tyler Boyd's catch percentage.
AJ Green was hurt that season, I believe, too.
Oh, was he?
Yeah,
Jeez.
at some point.
He did get hurt in this, but he did.
It was like that was the season with the splits, so he got hurt at some point this season.
But Boyd had a 70% catch percentage. Last year was 60%. Mm-hmm. So if he gets that number back, and his first 2 years in the league, he had like 68, 66%. So if he gets that number from 60 to like 68, 69, 70% again, it doesn't matter if he has less targets, he's going to be more efficient.
Right.
And his yards per reception was pretty low last year too, at 11.6 versus 2018 at 13.5. Mm-hmm. So if that number goes up again with the catch percentage, it doesn't matter if he has like 10 less targets.
So I just wanted to give you really quickly the splits from 2018 with him playing with his pacing, I should say, with AJ Green on the field. So he was pacing at Tyler Boyd through weeks 1 through 8 of 2018 with AJ Green on the field. So this was the time that AJ Green played. Tyler Boyd, through those 8 games, had 132 targets. He was pacing out at 132 targets on the season, 98 receptions, 1,240 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. That was with AJ Green. Without AJ Green on the field in the second half of the season, he was pacing at 112 targets for 1,088 yards, 5 touchdowns. So I think when you look at
offense as a whole is just better with AJ Green.
Right, exactly. So I think what you're going to get from Tyler Boyd, especially if AJ Green plays a full season, is a lot more efficiency. And I think that even if I don't think T. Higgins is going to come in and take a lot of work, and I don't think John Ross is going to take a lot of work. Like I think 130 targets are going Tyler Boyd's way. 130 plus, he might reach 140, but I think that's what's going his way, and I think that he's good enough to get into that conversation of being, like if he catches 100 balls this year, and then he catches 10 touchdowns. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's going to have over 225 fantasy points, which would have him finish, if we were just basing it off last year's numbers, as the wide receiver 4 or 5 in fantasy. Now, we're not saying Tyler Boyd's going to do that.
No.
But you just get the picture of what he can do even with AJ Green in the offense.
Like, he's in the same category to me as some guys that are going a little higher than him.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's in the same category as like a Jarvis Landry, Diggs, Metcalf, Keenan Allen even. Like, I think he's kind of in that range, and he's going a round or two lower than that, and I think he's getting slept on a little bit. I think he should get moved up.
So the next guy that we were going to talk about was going to be Juju, but we've talked about Juju a million times. We love Juju.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this guy on the list, and you can agree or disagree, because
okay.
We haven't talked about him really at all. This isn't because he's on my dynasty team. I just realized that we haven't really talked about him all that much.
No, we haven't.
And what the situation kind of is for him, because I noticed that he was falling in the same conversation that we were just having about Tyler Boyd, about Christian Kirk. He's falling at an ADP of... Where are you, Brandon Cooks? I just had his name right in front of my face, and it's gone now.
ADP's Brandon Cooks ADP.
Wide receiver 33, ADP 78, 79th player off the board.
Mm-hmm.
That seems a little low for me, and I don't know why. So let me just...
You're not alone in this.
Let me just talk about last year. What we both projected Brandon Cooks to be a bust when everyone was saying draft him.
I remember writing an article about it, and then everybody was like, "What are
you talking about, dude?" And so Brandon Cooks, he play? I just want to clarify for posterity. I did not prepare for a Brandon Cooks conversation. So, did he play the full season? He played 14.
No, I don't
games.
think he did.
So.
Played like 12.
The interesting thing with Brandon Cooks is that last year, obviously, we talked about how he's going to bust. He didn't bust because he got hurt. He busted because he was trash. He was not playing well. Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 4. Robert was wide receiver 17. They just didn't utilize Brandon Cooks in that way in that offense. And I'm trying to find his numbers on the season. Where are you?
He had 72 targets in 14 games with 42 receptions, 583 yards, and just 2 touchdowns.
Wow. Yeah, the 2 touchdowns is where it killed them. Now, here's the big conversation that you need to have, because a lot of people are projecting Brandon Cooks not to be good or whatever, and they're not really excited about what Brandon Cooks is going to do. And it's interesting because you had a questionable situation with Mr. Is it Bill O'Brien?
The head coach of the Houston Texans is Bill O'Brien.
The new GM of the Houston Texans. Who they should have just hired a GM. But anyway, he traded star wide receiver for David Johnson. You know what I mean?
Which is so stupid.
And then traded a 2nd-round pick to get Brandon Cooks on his team. Now, we know about Will Fuller. We know about Kenny Stills, a guy who they also traded for in the season before. We know about those 2 guys. They had opportunity in the offense. They're good wide receivers. I think they're going to have... There's going to be some games where you can start them in fantasy football this year. Do I think they're draftable? No. Do I think they're ownable at this point? No. I think the only wide receiver in that Houston offense, for me, that's ownable is Brandon Cooks. Why would they go trade DeAndre Hopkins and then trade a 2nd-round pick? We don't know why they did anything that they did, but they obviously knew that they needed another wide receiver. So they went out, spent a 2nd-round pick on Brandon Cooks to bring him in, and to what? Be the 3rd wide receiver behind Kenny Stills and Will Fuller? No. They brought him in to be the number 1 wide receiver in that offense. So he's coming in. He's filling the DeAndre Hopkins role. Yes, he's not a slot receiver. Yes, he's going to play a different role. But I don't think Deshaun Watson plays to that mindset of, I like throwing it to the slot. I think he was just like, DeAndre freaking Hopkins is really good at football, so maybe I should just target him. Brandon Cooks is good at football. He's not as good as DeAndre Hopkins, but he's good at football. So I think he's going to get targeted. To be naive and say that he's not going to get targeted, over 110 times is just, like, to me, is stupid. Like, that's just like where are all the Hopkins targets going?
I'm 100% against you on this, so I'm just going to keep letting you talk. I mean, Look, you're not alone.
Where are the targets going to go? There was 150 plus targets who went to DeAndre Hopkins.
Will Fuller's going to get more targets than Brandon Cooks.
Why?
If he stays healthy. The problem is
Will Fuller the slot receiver? Is that why?
He plays the slot and the outside, but I think with Hopkins gone, he'll probably play the slot.
What's with the hate for Brandon Cooks? I don't understand it.
No, I mean, I don't dislike Brandon Cooks at all. I just think he kind of plays a vertical game. Like he goes, he runs as fast as he can. He goes deep, and then he might turn around. Like he plays like Metcalf, but he's a 5-footy, and he's fast.
Right.
He plays a very vertical game, so he's gonna have boom or bust weeks. But I don't know if it fits with like.
Is he better than the wide
Watson
receiver 35? 33, I should say.
To me, I think he kind of deserves to be in that range. Like I'd take him over Edelman, who's ranked ahead of him. I might take him over Hollywood Brown, who right now is ahead of him.
This depth chart from OurLads.com
says what
Randall Cobb is their slot receiver. Will Fuller is their right side receiver, and
on the outside.
Yeah, on the outside, and then Brandon Cooks is the other side. So, like, I really like. We can believe that Will Fuller is going to get more targets. I just don't see why that's the case.
So for me,
especially when Will Fuller is like, I mean, yes, Brandon Cooks has had 100 concussions, but Will Fuller has been pretty injury prone.
Correct. Yeah.
And like, so like if we just say if you go to playerprofiler.com, this is a helpful tip. They give you this thing. If you scroll all the way, you type the player's name and you scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, they give you this medical history report. And it tells you the injury probability of a player. And so right now Will Fuller has an injury probability of 63.5%. I just want to look at Brandon Cooks really fast. His injury probability for the season is around the same at 61%. So it looks like
they're both injury prone.
Yeah, it looks like they're both. So it looks like we're going to see a lot of.
I think Will Fuller probably has a better chance of getting injured, though. I was just to guess, but we're guessing injuries,
right?
So but the reason I'm not as high as Brandon Cooks as you are, for one, they did added Randall Cobb, who's gonna, he's not gonna take a lot of targets, but he'll take some targets. Kenny Stills is still there. He's gonna get like around 60 plus targets. Will Fuller, when he's healthy, is gonna get targets. Brandon Cooks will also get targets, yes, but now David Johnson is there. He'll get targets. Duke Johnson's still going to get targets. And but Deshaun Watson only threw the ball 495 times last year in 15 games. Rick, they don't throw the ball a lot.
We can look at the Houston Texans team stats here, and
they don't throw the ball a lot, and they
don't throw the football a lot. I won't disagree with you there. I just think that like to go look at David Johnson and all of a sudden think like, oh, well, he's going to take targets away from whoever.
It's not just David Johnson though. Like he's going to get targets. Well, Fuller's going to get targets. Kenny Stills is going to get targets. Randall Cobb's going to get targets. I mean, even Kiki Kote. It's geez.
All right, so listen. Here's last year their pass catching running back was not the same guy as their main rusher. He had 62 targets with Duke Johnson. Huh. I think David Johnson's going to get that similar workload, 60 to 70 targets. So I don't think that he takes Duke Johnson's role, so we can throw David Johnson in the garbage can. Through 11 games last year, Will Fuller had 71 targets through 11 games, which is, what is that? I wish I could pace it in my head, but I just can't. I can't do it.
I think that's around 110 targets.
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. So let's just say that it's around 110. So he had on a full season 110 targets. Kenny Stills in 13 games was only targeted 55 times. Kiki Kuti through 9 games was only targeted 36 times. So you talk about those two players, like they're probably both going to be in the ballpark of 60 targets. And if that, I don't think Kuti is going to get a lot of work this year.
Sure. And I think Kenny Stills will probably get around 65 targets.
Yeah, somewhere around that. But when you talk about the 150 targets for DeAndre Hopkins, that like literally Hopkins left. All of those targets are vacated in the wide receiver core. All of them.
Targets.
So if you just take, if you were assuming that Will Fuller had 110 targets last year, right? If he played a full 16. And you were to take Brandon Cooks and drop him into DeAndre Hopkins' slot, right? then what makes you like? Do you really think
I'll
that
have
Will?
An argument, right? So there's 150 targets for DeAndre Hopkins, correct?
Yeah.
I think Will Fuller will take about 10. Is that crazy?
No.
If he played a full 16.
So at least 140.
I think Kenny Stills is going to go up by about 10.
130.
You could make the argument for Kiki Kute. We'll just say for argument's sake, he'll only go up about 10. Then you also add Randall Cobb. How many targets do you think Randall Cobb takes?
See, I think Randall Cobb takes the Kuti role.
Like around 40 targets then?
Well, he played only 9 games, so I would say probably somewhere around 50. But yeah.
Okay.
Like it's
so
going to be
losing targets here for Brandon Cooks though. Like,
I'm telling you right now that Fuller's got his. So let's just say he's at 120. And then you take Kenny Stills and you throw him in the garbage. And you say he gets 55 to 60. Let's just say he gets 60. And then Randall Cobb comes in, plays a slot receiver role. He gets like 60 as well. That still leaves 120 to 130 targets for Brandon Cooks. Like, to me, I think that if you want to make the argument that Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller will get the same amount of targets this year, that's fine. I'm just telling you that if Brandon Cooks does end up with 120 targets, like last year, he was hot garbage with the Los Angeles Rams. He only had 72 targets. The year before, he was a wide receiver 1, and he had 116 targets. So the difference in those 2 seasons was him not getting targets, right? So him getting dropped into the Houston offense, basically replacing what you would see from like a majority of those DeAndre Hopkins targets are going to go to Brandon Cooks. And if he plays a full 16 games or, plays 15, 16 games, he's going to get 120 targets. I think that's a lock. And so if he does do that, and looking at his efficiency, looking at how many touchdowns he can get, he's still going to have opportunity.
I still don't think he's going to get like 120 targets.
I don't understand why you can't see that. There's 150 vacated targets, and you really think Randall Cobb is going to walk in and take all of those? Like, it's a redistribution
not even
system.
Close. He won't take all of those. But if he takes 60, that leaves 90 targets.
So you think Brandon Cooks is going to get 90 targets?
Yeah, I think he'll probably end up with around 90 targets, unless Will Fuller gets hurt.
Yeah, see, I don't.
Significant time. If Will Fuller does not get hurt, I don't think Cooks gets more than 90 targets.
So you think they spent a second-round pick?
Yep, because it's Bill. Absolutely.
So that
100%.
So that Randall Cobb could get signed and come in and take 60 targets.
Brandon Cooks is going to play a role for that team. Like, I think they wanted somebody to just go deep. Because it's Bill O'Brien, and he's like, I don't think he's a good GM at all. I think he's probably one of the worst in the league, if not the worst. I think if Will Fuller gets hurt,
I'm sorry, it's just not computing for me. It doesn't with that many vacated targets. I understand Randall Cobb came in. I understand there's other wide receivers there, but to me,
not to mention you're kind of ignoring the fact that
110
Johnson is still on that team, and
Duke Johnson's not going to be used.
He will.
He won't.
He's not going. He might not get the same amount of targets as he did last year.
Mark my words. Duke Johnson will be cut before the season starts.
Sure. If you want to think that, go right ahead.
Brandon Cooks in 2018 had 203 fantasy points. He finished as the wide receiver 13. Do you think it's impossible for him to get 110 targets?
No, definitely not.
And if he does, based on his efficiency, Brandon Cooks will finish as a top 15 wide receiver in 2020. I mean, it just... To me, he's in a significantly better offense. He's going to get... I don't know. A second-round pick he was traded for. Bill O'Brien's a freaking head coach.
Yeah. Bill O'Brien's an idiot, dude.
He's an idiot, but he bought. It's not like he was a stupid GM sitting in his upper office and the coach is just like, this guy's a complete moron. Let's just not target Brandon Cooks.
I understand they're going to use him, but it doesn't mean Deshaun Watson isn't going to throw it to him every possession.
No, I know that.
I'm just for a specific role.
Like when you talk about the amount, yes, Deshaun Watson only had 495 attempts, right? And, Deshaun Watson also did not play week 17, by the way.
Yeah, AJ McCarron had
a little bit. He probably would have reached over 500 had he played that game.
It was over.
As a team, they threw 534 pass attempts as a team. So I do think, like I said, there may be a disagreement here, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Brandon Cooks to get 110 to 120 targets. And when you're talking about a guy
of the show, he is a kind of a forgotten about player. I just personally am not drafting him.
I think you're still on the hate train that you had last year for him. And it's time to get off.
Maybe a little bit, but I just
it's time to get off.
I just don't think the targets are there like you do. I don't.
I really don't want to spend,
unless Will Fuller
we've already spent 15 minutes talking
then
about
it changes
this.
Everything.
But I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't like with 150 vacated targets from DeAndre Hopkins. Yes. What's his name is coming in. David Johnson's taking Duke Johnson's role. Duke Johnson's
so let's say that happens.
Duke Johnson's going to be gone. Yes, Randall Cobb comes in. Randall Cobb is probably going to take a majority of what Kiki Kuti did. I'm just explaining to you what's going to happen. And then you're talking about Will Fuller and I'm talking about Will Fuller and Kenny Stills probably getting the same roles that they have, which leaves you with 110 to 120 targets left completely vacated that will probably go to Brandon Cooks because that's what they traded him to do. I'm not saying that 120 like
they didn't trade.
Do you realize how many targets a game that is?
He's not going to take Hopkins' role. He's not going to take fully DeAndre Hopkins' role. He's there for a specific role in the offense.
Yeah, but you don't understand how little 120. That's 8 targets a game. Like that's not even like DeAndre Hopkins was getting targeted 11 times a game. Like I'm not even talking about him taking the DeAndre Hopkins role. If I was saying he's taking Hopkins' role, he's going to get 150 targets. You can peg me as a moron. I'm just telling you 110 to 120 targets is not it's not out of the realm of possibility at all. And if he does do it, he's a wide receiver. He's a top 15 wide receiver.
It's not out of the realm of possibility. I just don't think it's going to happen.
I don't understand.
You're talking to one of the biggest downers on Brandon Cooks right now. So
I don't like you. You got to get off the train, bruh. It's time to leave.
I don't know, dude.
You stayed on the train when it was supposed to unboard it last year. I
don't get how you're ignoring the fact
I don't carry my takes over.
Like, you're like Duke Johnson's going to get cut. Like he's not going to get cut. He's not.
Why though?
He might not get 62 targets. But if David Johnson takes those 62 targets, you think, Duke Johnson's going to get more than the 16 that Carlos Hyde got. I'm
open for being wrong, and people can prove me wrong. I just don't think that, like, the guys that you're talking about, the Randall Cobbs, like, yes, you're talking about Randall Cobb, you're talking about Duke Johnson, you're talking about Kiki Kuti, you're talking about some of these guys, and they don't carry enough name weight to take away.
Guys are going to get a lot of targets.
I'm just telling you, they don't carry enough
10 here, 20 there, and it's not going to leave.
Yeah, but I just listed 40 guys, and if they take 40 targets away from Brandon Cooks, and he was supposed to assume the DeAndre Hopkins 150 targets, then that's just 110 targets for Brandon Cooks, and he's exactly where I was talking about, 120 to 110 to 120 targets.
It's the low end of what you were talking about, but
that's fine.
I just think Will Fuller,
the year he was a wide receiver 13, he had 116 targets.
And I think Kenny Stills on the game. So you give him.
I have Brandon Cooks projected at 135 targets, but I have him pooping himself in the 59% catch rate percentage. What do you have him at?
95.
Okay, so tell me who you have over him.
So I did project it as Will Fuller playing a full 16. So he probably will get I have him 93 targets. Sorry. I have Will Fuller at 108, Brandon Cooks 93, Kenny Stills 64, Kiki Kuti at 46, and Randall Cobb at 40. So
how many passes did you project this team for?
536. I have David Johnson at 47 targets, Duke Johnson at 37.
I have David Johnson at 28 targets, Duke Johnson at 29.
You only have David Johnson at 28 targets?
I'm sorry, 58 is what I meant to say. He's at 58, sorry. But this is where we disagree. Cobb and Kiki Kuti, I have at 38 and 20. Kenny Stills, I have at 60, and then Will Fuller is 120. And Brandon Cooks is at 135.
Okay, what about the tight ends?
Like the way, and Darren Fells and Jordan Atkins, 51 and 42. Like it distributes.
How many pass attempts do you have?
565.
So that's okay. I have 30 less pass attempts projected.
Yeah, see, I
think that's partly what
but like even like if you take out Jordan Atkins' numbers, you know what I mean? It just doesn't work. I'm kind of mad because I thought we were going to end this episode sooner, but whatever.
Well, we can end it now. Agree to disagree.
I just can't,
because we're not going to change each other's minds.
I know. I'm trying to understand. Like, I get where you're coming from, But I just don't get if there's 150 vacated targets and Brandon Cooks was traded for a second round pick, to me in my head, the math puts together 110 targets for Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, he'll get, I think, majority of the 150.
And I projected him at 135 because I have the extra targets there based on projecting them at 565. So if they do pass it that much, then there's an opportunity for that. But even at your situation, I'd probably take all those targets that I just took off him and take 5 off everyone else. And, I could take 20 off Brandon Cooks, 5 off Will Fuller, and then 5 off another guy. And he'd still end with 115 or 120 targets, and everyone's getting theirs.
If they throw the ball 565 times.
No, I'm talking about 535. I was talking about taking 35 targets away from my projections just at the wide receiver position.
And then you have Cobb at 20 targets.
Yeah, I think Cobb is an absolute garbage can.
I don't think he's going to be in. I only have him at 40 targets, so I'm not saying he's going to take over the offense, but he'll have a small role.
I just want to know. He had
80 targets.
30. He had 38. I'm sorry. What was that with Dallas last year? 80 targets with Dallas.
That's just a guess. I think he had around.
I think he's going to be 30 years old when the season starts. Yeah, he's going to be 30. He had a little role with Dallas, but with Green Bay,
83 targets.
He had 38 receptions. I don't think Randall Cobb is garbage. I just don't see him getting if you want to swap. This is just based on what I thought. But I'm just look at that whole receiver core. Will Fuller, injury prone. Kenny Stills, injury prone. Brandon Cooks, injury prone.
Injury prone.
Randall Cobb, all 3 of those guys could get hurt, and Randall Cobb could be the new DeAndre Hopkins. You just never know. But I'm just thinking, you can redistribute targets as however you want. Let's just say we pull 15 off Brandon Cooks in my projections and add it to Randall Cobb, where he gets 60 targets. Same as Stills. I don't know. It's there's so many ways Brandon Cooks could get to 110 to 120 targets in this offense.
I think he could I think realistically he's going to get around 100. Yeah. I don't think he's going to get 130 though, he projected him at.
Yeah, I mean 130 is a little hefty. But the funny thing is that I gave him 130. If I gave him his career catch percentage and the same amount of touchdowns that I think he would get, he would be insanely good. But I put him at 59% as his catch percentage, so he only came down with 80 catches. I have him at 180, so he's in the top 20.
We'll top see. 15. You could be right, and he is forgotten about the title.
Don't sound like you're swallowing your own vomit there.
I am. There's a lot of people that
we don't disagree enough on this show, so
yeah. There we go. We can have something to disagree about. Brandon Cooks.
I guess so. That'll do it for Forgotten Players. Be sure to check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Click on the draft guide button and then buy our draft guide. Don't even read the page. Just buy the draft guide. We'll talk to you on Tuesday, my friends.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.